Have you ever wondered how quickly life can change? One day, you have everything you worked for. The next, it's all gone. This is the unforgettable story of Ethan Carter, a hard-working single father who lost his career, his savings, and nearly his hope. But sometimes, the greatest endings begin with the hardest beginnings. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories every week. Ethan had spent 12 loyal years working for one of the biggest food companies in the city. He wasn't the CEO. He wasn't famous. He was simply a dedicated operations manager who arrived early every morning and left long after everyone else. His 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was the center of his world. After his wife passed away from an illness 3 years earlier, Ethan promised himself he would never let Lily feel alone. Every morning he packed her lunch, braided her hair the best he could, and walked her to school before heading to work. Life wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Until one Friday morning, employees were suddenly called into the conference room. The atmosphere was unusually quiet. Everyone sensed something was wrong. At the front of the room stood Victoria Hayes, the company's powerful CEO. She looked confident, calm, and completely emotionless. Without any hesitation, she announced a major restructuring. Departments would be closed. Hundreds of employees would lose their jobs immediately. When Ethan heard his name on the list, he froze. He couldn't believe it. 12 years of loyalty had disappeared in less than 30 seconds. Trying to remain calm, he respectfully asked if there was any chance to discuss the decision. Victoria looked directly at him and replied with only a few cold words. "This is business, Mr. Carter. Security will escort you out." Those words echoed in his mind as he packed the few belongings from his desk. Family photos. A coffee mug Lily had painted for Father's Day. A notebook filled with ideas he would never get to use. As he walked out of the building for the last time, rain began falling heavily. It felt as though the entire world had turned its back on him. That evening, Ethan sat quietly at the kitchen table, staring at unpaid bills. His savings wouldn't last more than 2 months. Rent was overdue. The bank had already called twice. Lily noticed the sadness in her father's eyes. She gently placed her small hand over his and smiled. "Daddy, everything will be okay. You're the strongest person I know." Her innocent words nearly brought him to tears. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Ethan made a decision. He refused to let this be the end of their story. He opened his laptop and searched for every possible opportunity. Then something unexpected caught his attention. An abandoned bakery on the edge of town. Old, dusty, forgotten, and surprisingly, affordable. He had no experience running a bakery. Everyone would have called it a terrible investment. But sometimes, the biggest risks lead to the greatest miracles. Little did Ethan know, walking through that old bakery door would soon change not only his life, but also bring face to face the very woman who had taken everything from him. To be continued. When you're ready, alright Part 2 where Ethan buys the bakery and begins rebuilding his life. The very next morning, Ethan drove across town to see the old bakery. The building looked even worse than the photos online. The paint was peeling. The windows were covered in dust. A faded wooden sign hung crooked above the entrance. Most people would have turned around and left. But Ethan saw something different. He saw a possibility. As he pushed open the old wooden door, a soft bell rang above him. Inside, time seemed frozen. Old bread racks stood untouched. A vintage brick oven sat quietly in the corner. Flour still covered parts of the wooden counter as if the last baker had simply walked away years ago. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He imagined warm bread filling the room with its comforting aroma. He imagined customers laughing together over fresh coffee. Most importantly, he imagined Lily smiling behind the counter. That dream was enough. Within a week, Ethan sold his car and used nearly every dollar he had left to buy the bakery. His friends thought he had lost his mind. "You've never baked anything in your life," one of them laughed. "You're throwing away your last chance." Even the bank manager warned him that the business would probably fail. But Ethan had already made his decision. Failure was no longer his greatest fear. Giving up was. The first few weeks were exhausting. Every morning before sunrise, Ethan watched baking tutorials online. He practiced making bread over and over again. The first loaves burned, the second batch collapsed, the third tasted terrible, but every mistake taught him something new. Meanwhile, Lily became his biggest helper. She swept the floors, arranged empty shelves, and drew colorful little decorations to make the bakery feel welcoming again. One evening, after hours of hard work, she looked at her father and whispered, "Daddy, one day there will be a line of people waiting to buy your bread." Ethan smiled. "I hope you're right." She shook her head confidently. "I know I'm right." Those simple words gave him more strength than anything else. Finally, after nearly 2 months of endless work, the bakery was ready. Fresh paint covered the old walls. New lights filled the room with warmth. The smell of freshly baked bread floated into the streets for the first time in years. On opening day, Ethan stood behind the counter, nervous. He kept looking out the front window. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes, then 20. Not a single customer walked in. His heart slowly began to sink. Had everyone been right? Was this dream about to end before it had even begun? Just as Ethan was losing hope, the bakery door slowly opened. An elderly woman stepped inside with a gentle smile. She looked around, took a deep breath, and said, "I haven't smelled bread like this since I was a little girl." She bought 2 loaves of bread. Before leaving, she smiled warmly. "I'll be back tomorrow." Ethan thanked her with tears in his eyes. He didn't realize that one happy customer was about to change everything. Because that sweet elderly woman had a habit. She told everyone in town whenever she discovered something special. And within days, the little forgotten bakery would become the busiest place in the neighborhood. But Ethan had no idea that another visitor was also on her way. The woman who had fired him without mercy. Victoria Hayes. To be continued. When you're ready, alright *part 3 *. 3 weeks passed, and something incredible began to happen. Every morning before sunrise, the warm smell of freshly baked bread drifted through the quiet streets. People who had never noticed the old bakery before suddenly found themselves stopping outside. At first, it was just a few customers. Then a dozen. Soon, there was a line stretching down the sidewalk before the doors even opened. Word spread quickly throughout the town. People weren't just coming for the bread. They were coming because they could feel something special inside the little bakery. There was kindness, there was honesty, and there was hope. Every customer was greeted with a genuine smile. Every loaf was baked with care. Every child who walked in received a free cookie from Lily. She had made it her own little tradition. If they leave smiling, she would say, they'll always come back. And somehow, she was right. One afternoon, a local food blogger happened to stop by after hearing about the bakery from friends. She ordered a cinnamon roll and a cup of coffee. The moment she took her first bite, her eyes widened. "This is unbelievable," she whispered. She spent the next hour taking photos of the bakery, the fresh pastries, and Ethan working beside his daughter. That evening, she posted an article titled, "The Forgotten Bakery That Became the Heart of Our Town, *." By the next morning, thousands of people had shared the story online. Customers started arriving from neighboring cities. Some drove over an hour just to taste Ethan's famous sourdough bread. Others came simply to meet the father and daughter everyone was talking about. Business was booming. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't worried about paying bills. He wasn't afraid of tomorrow. He finally believed that life could be beautiful again. One evening, after closing the shop, Ethan counted the day's earnings. Lily looked up at him with sparkling eyes. "Daddy, does this mean we're okay now?" Ethan smiled through tears. He knelt beside her and hugged her tightly. "Yes, sweetheart, we're finally okay." The little girl wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Mom would be proud of you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The bakery was silent except for the soft sound of rain tapping against the windows. Then, something unexpected happened. A black luxury car slowly pulled up outside. It was unlike any vehicle that had ever stopped in front of the bakery. Its polished surface reflected the warm lights shining through the windows. The driver stepped out first and opened the rear door. A woman wearing an elegant black business suit stepped onto the sidewalk. Her high heels clicked softly against the pavement. She stood still for several seconds, staring at the bakery's sign. Her expression slowly changed from curiosity to disbelief. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. This tiny bakery, the one everyone was talking about, belonged to Ethan Carter, the very employee she had fired without a second thought. Victoria Hayes slowly walked toward the entrance. Inside, Ethan was wiping down the counter, completely unaware of who was about to walk through the door. The little bell above the entrance rang. Ethan looked up with a friendly smile, expecting another customer. But the smile slowly disappeared. Standing in front of him was the woman who had taken away his career, his security, and nearly his future. For a few long seconds, neither of them spoke. The bakery fell completely silent. Even the customers waiting in line sensed the tension. Victoria looked around at the crowded bakery, the shelves that had nearly sold out, and the smiling faces of loyal customers. Then she looked back at Ethan. For the first time since they had met, the powerful CEO had no words. And Ethan realized something important. The man who had once walked out of her office with nothing was now standing in a place she could never take away from him. What Victoria would say next would change both of their lives forever. To be continued. In Part 4 the emotional confrontation between Ethan and Victoria begins. Reveal